Yeah, we're good. I was able to hear myself, so. Good morning. I'm actually amazed that so many of you are awake and functional this morning. Was anybody here? You made it into the room. I'm counting that as functional. Function is a gray scale. It's got a gradient there, so we're all good. Anyway, I want to thank you for coming out this morning. Thank you for coming to the conference and supporting BSides DC. Hopefully you'll actually have a very enjoyable conference, learn some stuff here. I am Nathaniel Davis. I'm one of the organizers here with BSides, but just to assuage any fears, I still had to go through the call for papers process and get evaluated like all the other speakers. So even though I'm wearing the staff shirt, I did not get any preferential treatment. So just wanted to throw that out there. But yes, this is my talk, training with Raspberry Pi. So a quick little background about myself and how I got into working with the Pi. So I started off in information security as a policy analyst. I got brought in because some people I knew thought I actually understood tech. It just kind of happened that way. So I got in and they're like, well, we need somebody who can do policy work. So I started doing a lot of the policy reading, and I realized that I was generating some just really boilerplate, crappy policy. I didn't understand what was going on with the issues that I was supposed to be helping the company secure against. So I started looking into a lot of the stuff and got to the point where I realized that to be able to actually write quality policy, I needed to be able to actually understand what was happening on the network. Some of the vulnerabilities I was hearing about that we were trying to write and secure against, I had no clue. I could just say, well, let's just put up this firewall rule, and okay, maybe this will work. I don't know. So I found out that I needed a way to actually practice some of this and learn some of it. So I started looking for things. And the whole quest to actually find this information and have a way in which I could safely practice is why I developed the RangeBox. And the RangeBox is a Raspberry Pi training platform, and I'll get further into it. And I just want to caution people, I recognize that for some people this is going to be really high level. It may be stuff that you already know. So for some of you that actually get bored with that, I have turned it on. The RangeBox is active. So the SSID is live fire. So if you want to go against it, feel free. There's also a Where's Waldo kind of scavenger hunt hidden in there. And the reason behind that, as you see Seth is raising his arm in the back cheering about it. I'll get into the reason behind the Where's Waldo in just a little bit. But there's also a catch. The catch is it resets after a set period of time. So if you're working against it, just be knowledgeable of that. When I gave this talk in Vegas, I actually had a prize associated with it. Nobody bothered to try and do the challenge, so if you successfully get it, let me know. I'm looking for a specific phrase that's associated with a picture that's hidden in there. But if you don't, I'll tell you about it after the fact. But if you definitely get it, let me know, and we will continue on. So the RangeBox itself, what is it? Well, in this whole process of trying to find a way in which to practice, I realized that there's not a whole lot of good information out there for people who are looking to practice their skill set, somebody who is new getting into the field. You start looking at it and you find these really complicated hacks that people lay out step by step. But if you start looking for entry-level work, there's nothing about it. How do you actually train people? And that's one of the problems that I've realized in this industry is that there is no methodology for people to actually train or practice that doesn't include, hey, your neighbor's got insecure Wi-Fi, go up against them because they're not going to report you. I've actually had somebody say, well, why'd you build this? You don't need to do that, especially when everybody's doing insecure stuff around you. It's the principle of the thing. This way, well, what happens if you actually have the one person who's set up something that's actually a honeypot just to try and capture you? Just looking to see who's doing stuff, just because they're bored, and that's kind of their job. So that's part of one of the requirements for the actual RangeBox is I needed something that I owned, something that was inexpensive that I could actually work with, and that's part of the reason that I chose the Pi as a platform. I also needed something that I could see both sides of it. So if I'm going against it from one aspect, I still need to be able to get into it from the other side to see what's happening, make changes, tweak some things, so that I'm actually aware of both sides of the platform. And so, as you see, I've got part of the reason I was making it is just the lack of information, the whole risk associated with production systems, and the fact that since it's my platform, I can go in, change things, and I get to the point where, all right, I've done this enough times, let me move on to something else. Let me remove this component, drop in another one in place, and it works. If you're trying against a production system or somebody else's system that they actually own, you don't have that freedom. You can't alter it without them noticing under most circumstances. Now, why a training platform? I talked about the legal environment. Anybody who's been doing any sort of security research knows that it's a very, very questionable area right now. Sometimes you get people that come after you just because of a terms of service violation. You end up with other things where they're looking at it going, well, you've also violated this rule, you've violated that. Everybody's heard of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, I'm assuming. Either that or you've all fallen asleep already. So anyway, but Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it's from 1986. It hasn't been updated to any, it's gone through a couple of updates, but it doesn't actively cover all of the things that we're doing now. It was written for a much simpler technology time. Then you got federal wiretap laws. This is a Wi-Fi platform. Now, Google just recently lost one of their appeals, and there's actually talk that, from an article I found in September where people are now considering a class action lawsuit against Google if they can prove that their information was captured by their little, the Google Maps camera cars. So they tried to say that, no, we're just looking at this so we can enhance our maps. But for the most part, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, were saying, no, you intercepted protected communication without the other party knowing. So now they ran afoul of wiretap legal issues. Then you've got individual state statutes that also help tie in with a lot of the wiretap stuff. Some places say as long as one party in the conversation recognizes that they're being recorded, you're okay. Others say nobody at all. So depending upon where you are, you're going to run into different legal circumstances. But one of the great things about it, and EFF actually makes this comment regularly, you own it, you own it. It's your device. How can you violate the terms of service if you created the terms? You set your own terms. The other thing is, this makes it very, very easy to use. The whole Rangebox platform, I've got it up on SourceForge right now. You get in, and I've got the image. It's a 4 gig image. All you have to do is download it, unzip it, write it to just basically DD to a SD card, plug it into your Pi, and you're good to go as long as you've got the other components. And I'll talk about the other components you need a little bit further on. But one of the great things I did with this is I made it repeatable. It's randomized. Every time it comes on, it changes your Wi-Fi passcode. So it's not like you're working with a router or something where you have to go in and change your passcode every time you want something new, because you're eventually going to get to the point where, I remember, why am I even going through all the hassle? Sure, it's a 2-minute process, but even still, why go through that hassle if you just want to get to the next step? So you get to the point where this forces you to do it. It forces you to actively work at it. The other thing I realized, nobody had done this. There was nothing out there that actually had a random Wi-Fi setting. Sure, you had a couple of honeypots that would actually change some things on you, but for the most part, it wasn't something that would come up, change your passcode, and be stable long enough for you to use it, and then change the next time you needed to use it. So why the Pi? It's a very, very powerful, cheap platform. Right now you can get them for less than 30 bucks. Once you start adding in additional components that's required to build the Rangebox, you're looking at $75 or less on average to actually build it. So it's something that you can put together for relatively inexpensive, have quite a bit of power. It's portable. You can take it pretty much wherever you want to. But the real reason, I had it on hand. I'm sure I could have built it on a desktop and then I would have lost the portability factor, but I had a Pi sitting in a box that I'd been waiting to use for like 6 months, and I was like, hey, let's do this. So what does it actually take to make the range box itself? And one thing I want to point out, I have this nice, shiny aluminum case. The case itself cost me more than all of the other components combined. It's a CNC milled aluminum case. It's fantastic. I beat the crap out of this box. It lives in my bag. I take it pretty much everywhere so I can just play with it when I get bored. So you don't have to get the shiny case. You don't even have to have a case at all because it is a Pi. If you're just going to keep it in the location, it's something simple. So don't assume that for this whole $75 price tag that I mentioned that you get the case as well. Just wanted to clarify that. But one of the things on it is for the Pi, you'll need a Wi-Fi dongle. I am running just WEP 104 right now, so it's very, very easy. But again, this is a training platform. It's a practice. So you have something that you can successfully get through. There's more than enough talks that actually deal with WEP and how to actually break WEP. You can find tutorials all over the web on it. Once you actually try and get things to work on that is a completely different story. But so once you've got your Wi-Fi dongle, then you actually need to turn it into an access point. We have host AP. You're also going to need a DHCP server on it, just so that anybody that does connect, if you're trying to use some of the advanced stuff on there, because not only do I have the randomized web, but I also have from OWASP their Matillidae suite, which is a host of vulnerable web applications. And so that allows you to practice a whole bunch of different things. Your cross-site scripting, SQL injection, a lot of these things that you hear about regularly. So the LAMP web server required to actually make some of this work. So the key randomization code, and one of the big problems was I had to do some system configuration changes to actually get everything to play nice together. Now talking about the Wi-Fi dongles, you need something that has master or AP mode compatibility. I know the Arthurus chipsets do that. That's one that I personally like. There are others that will work. So on the device right now, I'm using one of the small dongles. I'll actually hold it up. It's this one here. This is a Netgear N150 model number WNA 1100. It's a personal preference, but it's what I have everything set to work off of right now. I haven't done a whole lot of other work. I do have a micro USB that I've been told works. I've messed with it a little bit. However, anything that's running the Realtek chipset, the 8188 CUS, needs heavy customization. I know, I think it's 80Max actually did some work to be able to set that chipset into master mode, but it required a specialized and customized version of host AP that I'm not running. If there's enough interest in that, I'm willing to help somebody actually get that set up, but it's something I have not done yet because I only have one, but I've got a system that works for me. So it's something that I'm absolutely willing to help with. If you're interested, please talk to me after the fact. So I mentioned about host AP. Host AP is great because it's really, really easy, just some mild configuration changes to actually get everything up and running. There is a problem when you're trying to actually accomplish this. It's designed for static configurations. It's designed so that you turn it on, you get the same thing every single time. I didn't want to do that. So I had to actually find a way to work around it. One of the problems is that the config file doesn't actually accept any system variables. So you can't tell it, hey, I want you to read dev random and write it. It won't let you do it. You can't specify a key through that process. So I actually had to find a way to get around these limitations created by the config file. So a couple of modifications, writing some custom scripting that actually runs when it boots up is the way I got around it. And so that's what I did. So number one here is actually the point where I don't think any of you can actually see that. So if you're interested, I can pull it up a little bit later on. But what it does, it does a check. It looks to see whether or not a config file already exists. If the config file's there, scrub it. It just dumps it. then it actually builds a fresh config file. So the second one is where it actually generates a key. It's just a simple call to dev random. Yes, I know that it is not actually a qualified random key generator, but I'm not looking for something to provide security. I'm looking for something I can break. So I've had people ask that. I've got heckled from a couple of people that have made comments about, well, it's not a secure key generator. Not the point. The point is to be able to break it. So 3 actually is where I start the whole creation of the file. It's just simply cat the rest of the information that's in the bottom of the file off to a config file so that it's there when it runs. Just real simple, really crude, fast code, because I did this on a whim, really. So I just messed with it for a little while, and I got it to work. I know that there are better ways to do it, and that's actually one of the things I'm looking at doing later on, and it's actually on my list of eventuals as I improve this. And so arrow number 4 is just showing you where the key that was defined earlier gets written into the config and then processed. I talked about having a DHCP server. Obviously, it's going to be easier than doing a manual config every single time. It makes it so that once somebody gets past your web portion, that they can then associate with the device and then be able to move on and do the web-based aspect of it. One of the things you have to do is you have to go through and make sure that you configure your DHCP so that's broadcasting on WLAN 0. If you don't actually do it, it's going to try and put it out on the RJ45 port on the Pi, and you'll never see anything, and you'll beat your head against it for hours. I'm not saying I actually did that, but hey, it happens. Just got to make the other thing, make sure you assign a subnet. Speaking from experience, yet again, multiple hours lost because I forgot a few little tiny things. I mentioned some of the challenges that were associated with actually pulling this together. Boot order. Boot order is incredibly important in this aspect because you're trying to create a config file as it's booting. Plus, by default, all of your daemons load concurrently. As you get into a specific run level, you start seeing that your daemons are running concurrently. So I actually had to go through and force host AP and DHCP to wait until I'd actually created the config file. So I actually had to create a make config daemon, put it in there in the proper order so that it would read through and then come up. Otherwise, I'd get DHCP failure, I'd get host AP failure, all of these warnings, and yet again, going, why did this happen? Next thing, network traffic. So it's great. I got everything up and running. I've got this broadcasting Wi-Fi ID that's broadcasting in web, but I'm not getting any packets. One of the little things is if you don't have anything on the network to communicate, it's not actually going to see anything. So what I ended up having to do to actually get away with generating enough traffic so that I could go through the packet through the initialization vector generation process was I created a cron job that just sends out a ping every 15 seconds to a null address, something that's not even within the range that's offered by the DHCP, so it's never going to find it. It's just going to sit there and generate. So it's got an ARP broadcast. It makes it really, really easy to do an ARP replay. So once you've actually got that traffic, you can capture that and then move on. Now, I also mentioned, hey, you can actually read this one. So one of the other things that I mentioned was I set up the timer on that. So you can see, I've got a 5-minute timer on there. So every 5 minutes, it shuts down and brings it back up. So I see a couple people that have got their laptops out. I don't know if you're actively working against what I've got or if you're just doing something additional, but one thing to point out, if you were actually trying to capture initialization vectors and you weren't paying attention when it shut down, the key that you're trying to find will never actually be recovered because now you've got 2 sets of initialization vectors for 2 different passkeys that are causing problems. So I've had enough problems with demos in the past that I actually decided that I'm going to run a video because trying to do it live has gone sideways on me more times than I can count. So I'm actually going to run this and I'm going to talk over it so you can get an idea just to show you that it does in fact function, it does work, and I jumped ahead. So yeah, I know everybody knows Kali Linux. So I've got 3 different windows running here. And so one of the things that I've done with it, and so you've got, I've got to work on my sizing on this stuff. So you can see that I did it live. I just recorded it, didn't do a whole lot of editing. So I'm just initializing my device to actually capture it. That might work. Appreciate it. So I've gone ahead and I've initialized it. I've got it in monitor mode. I'm using so this is me actually going against the Pi. So I already started doing my ARP replay. I've already started looking at the rest of it. So this section here, you can see that it was actually monitoring at the time, and the ARP replay has started. So I'm now going to go ahead and capture the information. So it's going to take a little bit. So now that I've actually got the initialization vectors coming in, it's going to go ahead and run against it. So I'm going to keep talking about the Pi itself, because otherwise you're just going to be staring at numbers moving on a screen. And we spend most of our days staring at numbers moving on screens, waiting on computers. So I'm not going to force you to actually just sit there in silence and watch. This does not work. So one of the big problems that I've encountered with this, or one of the things I should point out about it, is so most people expect WEP to be fairly easily cracked. I did say that this was WEP 104. It's a longer key, so it actually forces you to watch the process, be aware of the process that's going on. And some of the other things I wanted to talk about while it's going, and we should see it in a minute or two where it's actually going to find the key. Not yet. Still early. But some of the things that I'm looking at and some of the suggestions that have been made to me about this were, hey, this is a great way to actually train people. Set it up in a classroom environment. And one of the options to improve it that's been suggested is, how about you actually start logging device association? If you do that, if you set this up in a classroom environment and you already you have a log of your students and their MAC addresses. Once a device is associated with it and you scrape that off and you keep that in a log file, as an instructor, you can monitor the fact that your student associated with that MAC address or that machine that student is working off of has successfully associated with the device, which means that they've already cracked the key. So you can tell what aspect they're on, what phase they're on, and you can identify, okay, well, this student's gotten it. I've got this group of 5 over here that hasn't gotten it yet. Maybe something's going wrong, and you get an idea of, hey, I need to target this particular group so that I can actually work with them a little bit more. So it makes it really, really easy to see what's going on, a way to gauge it, and that's the other reason for having a secondary method of getting in. In this case, I actually SSH into the box on a regular basis just to mess with it through the back end RJ45. And I'm still not there, still waiting. So one of the other aspects with it, as far as the whole training platform, I got people here now messaging me and all kinds of fun stuff. Everything happens when you're live. Aha, here we go. So one of the things you'll notice, I do have a key on that one, and it's the Bravo 299, and so, sorry, 72 Bravo Bravo. Now, I did tell you about SSHing into the box earlier. So this is me actually going back into the box. One of the things I created just as a way to monitor and check it is the fact that as I have it right to a log file. So every passkey that I use is in a log file, and the most recent one is at the bottom of it. This was originally written so that I could do verification that the randomization was working, and I could actually see what was happening on it. So you can see here where it actually matches the passkey that was found when I was actually running the crack. So if you actually once you get inside and you associate to it, then you can actually get into OWASP Matillidae and see some of the other stuff. Now, one of the things I want to point out, for those of you who if anybody was actually trying to do the challenge, I did flash up on the screen what I was looking for. There is this fantastic image that is my Where's Waldo image. And I was looking for somebody who was going to tell me that it was an epic Waldo fail. So we'll actually get to that further on. It actually there's a very funny story with it that I'm going to end on that's associated with it. So a couple of improvements. Something that I'm working on right now is WPA2, or WPA, so I'm actually trying to get away from WEP. but trying to set up a way to actually do it with either WPA2 or WPA. So that what I'm looking at doing is grabbing from basically from a rainbow table, doing a random grab line so that I've got something, a known key that I can then drop in place. Writing that in place and then setting it up so that using two dongles in this case, one as an access point, one as a client, have one broadcast out, go through every couple minutes, have it deassociate and then reassociate. So that process that you can actually capture that initial handshake as it's required to be able to break that. One of the other things, it's not platform specific. It doesn't have to be. And that's what I'm looking at doing is I'm actually looking at making it so that no reboot is required. Like I said, it was fast. It was something I could do to make it work. I'm now actually looking at cleaning it up, turning it into a package that I can distribute as opposed to sending out the entire image, because let's face it, a lot of people don't want to pull down I think the compressed size is 1.5 gigs that expands out into a 4 gig image file. A lot of questions get asked, well, why do you want to give me a full image? Because one, I'm lazy, and two, I don't know enough about actually creating an application package at this time to be able to give you a simple package that you can just run and it works. I talked about device association logging as far as from an educational standpoint, but even just being able to scrape that for other purposes allows you to turn it into a honeypot of sorts, especially if I improve the code so that all it needs is a service restart as opposed to a platform restart. So you get to the point where you can start using that as a honeypot, monitoring what's going on, see what people are throwing against it, and if they brick it, okay, you lost $75 as opposed to whatever production system that somebody may have been going against. Not a problem. It's a marginal cost when you're talking at that level. But one of the things I wanted to actually, a couple things. Now, about the Epic Waldo fail. So there are two people in the back of the room. So Jackie and Funtime, and they're in the back corner chuckling their heads off right now, who are part of the reason that I'm even up here, because I was talking about this, telling them what I'd been working on and what was happening, and they're the two people that, for the most part, helped push me forward to actually get up here and submit this information because they thought it was a good idea. Now, we were out one evening and they were telling me about this race that they had done, and they're like, there's no way you'd ever put me in a talk. Right there, guys. So, I just wanted to put that out there, but there is the Epic Waldo fail, mud splash, fall on your butt, and some happy cheers. So, now, as far as me, you can find me on Twitter at Gither. There's an email associated with this project, the Wi-Fi range box at Gmail. And I've got the image location up on SourceForge. I've gotten some feedback that says that image may be corrupted. I need to verify that. If you want to risk it and pull it down, let me know. But it's just, the only problem with it is it just didn't extract properly. So if you're willing to do that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm open for questions. Really? Nobody? All right. Say again? So yeah, I think it's a great thing, and it's. I hope I can actually get it out there as a place for people who can be able to work with it and learn from it, because I know I had problems with it, and I know I can't be the only one that has problems with this. Now, did anybody actually try to go against the box? Did anybody mess with it? You did? Any problems? Were you able to get in? Couldn't get in? Like I said, it's a 5-minute thing, so if you actually missed your time, then yeah. But if you want to stick around, I've got the room for like another 20 minutes, so I can actually keep it up and I can talk to you a little bit about it. But I'm actually done with as far as the presentation portion of this. If you have any questions or you have anything else, let me know. If you don't want to actually get up in front of the room or bring anything out, I will definitely talk to you after the fact. I'm gonna stick around for a little bit. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.